Imagine going to court to defend yourself, right? But instead of bringing a lawyer who's armed with legal precedents, you bring a whiteboard, a calculator, and the laws of theoretical physics.
It is a complete paradigm shift.
Right. You're handed this incredibly vague criminal charge,
Mm.
and instead of arguing your intent, you literally calculate the mathematical probability of your alleged crime even occurring.
And you mathematically prove that it equals 0.
Exactly. And that wild scenario is exactly what we're getting into on today's deep dive. We're exploring this fascinating collection of AI-assisted analyses from models like Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, Quinn, DeepSeek, and Grok.
Yeah, and they're all evaluating this highly unusual legal defense document called the Prison Self-Defense and Blood Letter of Accusation.
Which was written by a defendant named Dr. Chen Jingyuan. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore this incredible intellectual intersection where he used theoretical physics, network science, and international human rights law to basically dismantle a criminal charge.
But before we really dive into the math, we do need to set some parameters here because the sources deal with politically charged content.
Right, very charged.
Yeah, specifically accusations against judicial authorities and massive debates over free speech. So we are not taking any sides today.
No, definitely not. Our goal is strictly to report impartially on the ideas and the scientific arguments within the source material. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of the original author or the judicial system.
We are just looking at the data.
Exactly. So to start us off, what was Dr. Chen actually accused of? Like, what is the baseline reality here?
Well, he was convicted for forwarding, retweeting content online, and authorities claim this caused severe public order disruption.
Wait, just from forwarding a post?
Yeah. And they prosecuted him under a notoriously vague charge known as picking quarrels and provoking trouble.
Okay, let's unpack this, because trying to defend yourself against a charge like picking quarrels sounds like trying to play a game where the referee just makes up the rules as they go.
It is incredibly subjective, and the AI sources analyze this through the lens of the 1966 International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or the ICCPR.
Right, which is huge for international human rights law.
Exactly. And they found the proceedings violated several core principles. First is Article 9, which prohibits arbitrary detention based on vague laws.
Because if the law is that subjective, how can anyone definitively prove they didn't cause chaos?
You really can't. The sources also point to Article 14, guaranteeing the right to a fair, public trial and chosen defense counsel, both of which were apparently denied through secret trial.
Oh, wow. Secret trials. That's intense.
Very. And then there's Article 19 regarding freedom of expression, plus the principle of proportionality. Punishing someone for retweeting with a severe prison sentence violates that principle.
And didn't the sources also mention something about his education level being used against him?
Yes, they did. The prosecution argued that his high level of education was actually an aggravating factor.
Like, because he has a doctorate, he should have known better.
Basically, yes. And the analyses strongly note that punishing a citizen's intellect or high level of knowledge is an attack on the foundations of civilization itself.
I mean, that is just wild to think about. But if the law is so subjective, how did Dr. Chen even pivot from a legal defense to a scientific one?
Well, since the legal definition of chaos was vague, he turned to computer science to define what order and chaos actually look like in a digital system.
So he used the CAP theorem, right?
Exactly. Proposed by Eric Brewer back in 2000. It mathematically proves that in any distributed system like Twitter or WeChat, you cannot have all three guarantees: consistency, availability, and partition tolerance.
Right, and since network partitions, like, broken fiber optic cables or server crashes, are totally unavoidable, you have to choose between consistency and availability.
You got it. And social networks always prioritize availability. They want the app to load instantly when you open it.
Even if your feed is slightly out of sync with someone else's on the other side of the world.
Right, so they permanently sacrifice strict consistency, meaning that inconsistency, noise, and local chaos are built in.
They're intrinsic physical properties of the network.
Exactly. It's not a crime or an anomaly caused by a user.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. But wait, if the system is naturally chaotic, doesn't forwarding controversial opinions just add fuel to the fire?
How do you mean?
Like throwing a rock into a turbulent river. Even if the river is naturally chaotic, you are still actively adding to it, right?
That's a fair question. But to answer why his specific rock didn't disturb the river, we have to move from the theory to the physical topology of the network itself.
Oh, like where he was actually standing when he threw the rock.
Yes, exactly. And that brings us to scale-free networks defined by the Barabasi-Albert model.
Which follows a power law distribution, right?
Yeah.
Not just a standard bell curve.
Right. In this model, a tiny number of hub nodes like major media accounts hold almost all the connections.
While the vast majority of users are peripheral nodes with basically zero reach.
Exactly. And Dr. Chen had fewer than 100 followers. Most of those were inactive zombie accounts.
So he is the ultimate peripheral node.
He really is. And according to Cohen's critical threshold formula, these scale-free networks are extremely robust against random failures.
Meaning they don't break easily?
Yeah, you could remove almost 100% of peripheral nodes, and the network's giant connected component wouldn't collapse.
So what does this all mean? It's like saying if you pluck one leaf off a giant oak tree, the tree doesn't suddenly collapse. The structure doesn't even notice.
That's a great way to put it. The structure is completely safe.
But even if the structure is safe, what about the information he shared? I mean, could the message itself go viral?
That is the next piece of the puzzle. Now we have to examine the dynamic process of information spreading, how a post actually goes viral.
Right.
So Dr. Chen modeled these information cascades using self-organized criticality and the Galton-Watson branching process.
Oh, branching processes. That's like what epidemiologists use to track how a virus spreads, isn't it?
Yes, exactly the same framework. For an avalanche or a viral event to happen, the mean offspring number must be greater than 1.
And that's denoted as M or R naught, right?
Exactly. Every retweet has to generate more than one new retweet for the cascade to grow, but the source material calculates his specific parameters.
Factoring in his low followers, his near-zero historical engagement, and the algorithm suppression.
Yes. And his R naught was estimated to be somewhere between 0.05 and 0.12.
Oh, wow. That's basically zero.
Because it's so far below 1, he is in what physicists call the deep subcritical regime.
Meaning the spread is mathematically dead on arrival.
Pretty much. Mathematical theorems prove the probability of the cascade going completely extinct is virtually 100%. His expected total cascade size was around 1.11.
Wait, 1.11, meaning almost zero secondary forwards.
Yes, and think about the legal threshold for severe disruption under their judicial interpretations.
Which requires at least 500 forwards or 5,000 views, right?
Exactly. Dr. Chen's math proves his expected spread is roughly 500 times smaller than the legal minimum.
That is incredible. But, you know, people always talk about the butterfly effect, that a butterfly flapping its wings can cause a tornado. Why wouldn't that apply here?
He actually addressed that directly. The butterfly effect only happens when a system is already hovering at the critical state, where R naught is exactly at 1.
Oh, like dropping a pebble onto a super steep, highly unstable, snowy slope.
Right. If you drop it on a flat plane of snow, a subcritical state, nothing happens. The energy just dissipates.
And the prosecution never provided evidence that the network was in that highly unstable critical state.
No, they didn't. So his pebble was dropped on a flat plane. No avalanche was physically possible.
Wow. Okay, so if a peripheral node mathematically cannot cause an avalanche, who actually can?
And this brings us to the final, most devastating part of his defense. In network science, systemic risk and true avalanches are triggered by the hub nodes.
Because they hold all the massive connections.
Right. So Dr. Chen turns the scientific model right back on his accusers. He argues that judicial and state organs are the ultimate hub nodes in society.
Oh man, that is brilliant. He essentially took their own accusation, ran it through a physics simulator, proved it was mathematically impossible for him to be the cause, and then pointed the data right back at the authorities.
That's exactly what he did. He argued that when these hub nodes abuse their power, when they fabricate charges or run SQL trials, they are the ones eroding trust.
They are the ones pushing the entire societal network toward a highly unstable, supercritical state.
Yes, they make the avalanche possible. It's a profound collision between outdated Newtonian legal thinking, where A linearly causes B, and the reality of complex network sciences.
It really is. We try to apply simple cause and effect to these massive distributed systems, and it just doesn't work.
It just leads to fundamental miscarriages of justice.
Absolutely. And, you know, for everyone listening, we often feel overwhelmed by the chaos of social media. It feels like everything is falling apart.
It definitely feels that way sometimes.
But this deep dive really reminds us that this chaos is just a mathematical reality of the distributed systems we use every day.
It's built into the physics of the network.
Exactly. Which leaves us with a final unmentioned thought for you to ponder. As legal systems around the world grapple with the complexities of the digital age, what happens when courts are forced to rely on AI and physicists to determine guilt?
Because human judges can no longer comprehend the mathematical reality of the alleged crimes.
Right. It completely challenges what a jury of your peers even means anymore. Definitely something to think about.